All right, well, we can get started. I'll keep letting people in as they kind of trickle in. But welcome, everybody, to the McNally Jackson virtual event. We are very excited to be celebrating the launch of Danielle's book, True Story, which is a sociological study of reality TV that explores its rise as a culture-dominating medium and what the genre reveals about our attitudes towards race, gender, class, and sexuality. It's certainly a topic very close to my heart, so I'm very excited to hear what these guys have to say tonight. Danielle J. Lindemann is an associate professor of sociology at the university, interested in gender, sexuality, the family, and culture. She is the author of Commuter Spouses, New Families in a Changing World, and Dominatrix, Gender, Eroticism, and Control in the Dungeon. Her research has been featured in media outlets such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, The Atlantic, The Washington Post, Rolling Stone, Billboard, and the Chronicle of Higher Education. She has spoken about her work on National Public Radio and has written op-eds for CNN, Newsweek, Salon, Fortune, and Forbes. And she is in conversation tonight with Rax King, who is a James Beard Award-nominated author and host of the podcast Low Culture Boil. Her writing can be found in Glamour, Male Magazine, Catapult, and elsewhere. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her hedgehog and a toothless Pekingese. And she has a wonderful book called Tacky, which I recommend everyone checking out. So I'm going to hand over to these guys. Just to note, there will be time for questions at the end tonight. So feel free to drop them in the Zoom chat. We'll try to get to those. And if you enjoy this event, definitely check out the McNally Jackson website. We've got plenty of virtual and some in-person events coming up. And I'd love to see you all there. All right, I'll hand over to you guys.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight to celebrate with Danielle, the publication of her book, True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us. I have read it. It was excellent. I filled the margins with little stars and exclamation points. It taught me quite a lot about the, I guess what you'd call the sociological function of this type of entertainment that so many people love to hate. So Danielle, I thought that it would be fun to get the ball rolling tonight by me mentioning a handful of diverse, very disparate from each other reality TV shows, and maybe you could say in a few words what you think offhand the sociological value of each one is. So you game?
This is very Andy Cohen activity. I'm in 100%.
It's not. I'm not going to do the Andy Cohen-ish version of it where I get you to fight with people. Okay, so first on my little list, MTV's Next.
Right. Oh, we were talking about Next before we came on here, right? And I was saying, oh, I remember this old show because this was the show that when I was in my 20s in New York City, when you came home at like 3 a.m., there were 4 shows that were on, and they were all like zany reality dating shows, one of which was randomly Next that was on for hours and hours. So sociological takeaway from Next, maybe something about the kind of ever fleeting and ephemeral nature of romantic attachments and personal attachments more generally in our increasingly kind of individualized culture.
Yeah, Next was Tinder before Tinder was Tinder. Now that I think about it, it was the first, you could just swipe on people, but physically. It was so mean on that show. Okay, I have next Chopped.
Oh, Chopped. What can Chopped teach us? Well, okay, I do talk about the kids version of Chopped in the book. So I think one thing that Chopped kids can teach us is that the kind of expectations that we have for childhood and children are very culturally specific, and we think about them as kind of biological and fixed and essential, right? We might not think that kids can like make a coq au vin, but they can because they do it on the show. So I know that might have been cheating, but I'm going to go with that answer.
There's no wrong answers. Okay, what else have I got here? Oh, Jersey Shore, the classic.
Oh, Jersey Shore.
What can't it teach us?
What can't it teach us? I know there's so much to choose from. Everything from the Snooki's racial ambiguity and how race is socially constructed to the misogyny on that show. It's too much.
Yeah. It's a big ask. And finally, Undercover Boss.
Oh, Undercover Boss. Yeah, I do write about that in the book. I think, a Marxist analysis of Undercover Boss is fascinating, right? When you look at sort of this bourgeoisie figure going in and mingling with the proletariat, right? And they present him, usually him, as kind of like this bumbling guy who can't perform these like menial tasks. And you sort of see how the class system is not only about money, but is also about the sort of learned behaviors and norms and even values that we have. So it illuminates the class system for sure.
Yeah, I think that's why all the Marxists I know really like Undercover Boss, like to the point that, and like these are people who don't really watch reality TV and find it, boring or grating or whatever, but people who work menial jobs like Undercover Boss. Okay, so let's jump in. My number one big picture question after reading your book, and this is something that you address in a number of different ways, it's 2022. Reality TV has been a huge part of our entertainment landscape for, I'd call it like 20 years now, if not longer. And yet, those of us who enjoy it still tend to see it as a guilty pleasure, even though it's the site of like some real innovation in the industry. And even though it's been part of our lives for so long, it's not going anywhere. We might as well engage with it in a real way. But I guess I'm curious as to why you think we as a society have particular reservations about enjoying reality TV more so than other forms of entertainment that are unserious or silly or trashy.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of a convergence of reasons. So first, it's low culture, right? This is not high cultural consumption, right? But there are other forms of low culture like football, that as we've seen very recently, right? Quite popular. And I would say maybe definitely more socially valued. So there's a low cultural aspect of it. There's sort of the social contamination idea where you're watching people who are behaving in ways that, we consider to be bad, right, or wrong, or trashy, or slutty, or sloppy, right? And so you might be worried that you could be kind of contaminated by that behavior. You could be considered those things if you tune in. So there's that kind of stigmatization happening. But I also think, I was just saying this earlier today, right? Reality TV is very gendered. Even though people of all genders watch reality TV, it's more often women, and it's more often women appearing on the shows. Right. And in general, culture that's associated with women and femininity tends to be devalued. Right. Like think about like chick lit. Right. Or, chick flicks. Right. They're just movies. Right. And they make a lot of money. Right. But people don't necessarily tend to see them as culturally valuable. So I absolutely think that there's a gender dimension to why reality TV continues to be stigmatized in this way.
Sure, yeah, I would agree with that completely. If you want to talk about trashy and not super valuable entertainment, like Jack Reacher, they just cannot stop making TV and movies about Jack Reacher. I do not see the appeal, but it's I think trashy in like a boy stuff way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you're right that women's trashiness is just somehow more stigmatic than men's.
Right. People say it's not socially redeeming, but you could say that about a lot of kind of forms of entertainment. They're entertainment. They're not socially redeeming.
Right, of course. And that should be fine. Like, I don't always turn on the TV to better myself. Sometimes I just want to zone out for a stretch of time.
Exactly.
So we talked about why people tend to not take reality TV seriously. I'm going to jump on into taking it seriously. You talk throughout your book about controlling images and the way that reality TV perpetuates them, and the potential too that reality TV has to affect change on them. And I guess I'd be curious to hear you just say in brief what controlling images are, both in general and in the context of reality TV. And also on another level, what all this absorption of high octane stereotypical behavior is doing both for and to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So controlling images are sociologist Patricia Hill Collins' term for basically kind of stereotypes specifically of marginalized groups that are dominant in our culture. So, stereotypes about people of color, stereotypes about women, stereotypes about queer people, stereotypes about low income people. And what they do is they serve to kind of help us kind of rationalize and kind of normalize in our own minds the kind of inequalities that exist. So if you see like a person of a lower class status, like behaving on TV in some kind of bumbling, buffoonish way, right? In your mind, that helps you kind of rationalize and normalize, well, okay, that person is where they should be within the class system, right? Or if you see someone who's wealthier behaving in a more what we would consider to be higher class way, obviously in quotes, right? Then that rationalizes in your mind, okay, that person is where they should be, right? It helps us kind of explain away and deproblematize these inequalities that exist in our culture. And I think, reality TV absolutely does that for all of these groups, right? From looking at, portrayals of, historically portrayals of Black people in reality TV, kind of drawing on tropes that have existed in our culture since minstrelsy. Like you can look back at sort of stereotypical characterizations that existed in minstrel shows, and you can pinpoint them. There's like a one-to-one correlation between that and like portrayals in reality TV today. And they do a kind of certain work for us in our culture, is Collins's point, right? It's not an accident that they exist. They exist to kind of help us kind of explain away or rationalize the fact that these inequalities are still here. So these controlling images are all over reality TV, right? So it's images, again, of Black people, especially Black women, women in general, right? Kind of acting in kind of these shrill, stupid ways often, right? Images of working class people like Honey Boo Boo. The Honey Boo Boo family would be a prime example of that. And you can sort of trace, where these images came from and how they kind of pool in the well of reality TV. So it's certainly a vehicle for that.
Would you say that reality TV is especially culpable in the dissemination of these sorts of images? Or, I mean, maybe also reality TV is especially, I guess, revolutionary in the way that, because at points in your book, you do point out that like reality TV was the canary in the coal mine for gay representation on TV back in years when a lot of shows still weren't saying gay on the air at all, like scripted shows. And so like, I see there being maybe a double-edged sword of like reality TV benefits heavily from the existence and perpetuating of controlling images, but it also sometimes embraces its power to advance them in some way, even for profit.
Yeah. For sure, absolutely. And I think, that's a key argument in the book, right, that you've just pinpointed, which is that reality TV kind of is a funhouse mirror of ourselves, right? And it's a funhouse mirror. It shows us the kind of hideousness, what I would consider to be hideousness of ourselves, right? In amplified form. And certainly other forms of media are racist, sexist, classist, right? But I would say that reality TV really kind of turns the dial up to 11, right? On the racism, sexism, and classism, right? Heteronormativity as well. So it really does kind of show us our inequalities. It shows us kind of our materialism. It shows us some things about ourselves maybe we would prefer not to see. But at the same time, right, I wouldn't be such a fan of reality TV if I didn't believe in the potential of reality TV. It also shows us some beautiful things about ourselves. It shows us how diverse we are. In some ways, it's a much more diverse medium than other forms of TV and other forms of media. So it shows us that. Again, yeah, so historically, it's had representation of queer people, before other forms of TV and other forms of media have caught up. Going back to, even the first season of The Real World, but even before that, if you want to pinpoint the beginning of reality TV before that, there was a PBS series called An American Family in the 1970s, where they had a gay son in the family, right? I mean, this was revolutionary for TV at the time, and this was reality television. So I think it's showing us, if we look hard enough, it's showing us things that other forms of TV are not showing us. And it's showing us things in a hideous way, yeah, but it's also showing us some amazing possibilities if we know where to look.
Yeah, I mean, on the note of that hideousness, you say towards the end of your book, I have the quote written down, And I say this quote, like, not interested in relitigating the Trump years at all, but he is referenced. Both Donald Trump and reality TV have dazzled us using dramatics that are at once entertaining and pedestrian. So I think that argument speaks a lot to the hideousness on display and the grotesquerie, and our urge to identify with the grotesquerie or hold it at arm's length as we revel in it. And I guess I'm wondering, what is it about this exact confluence of pedestrian and over the top that makes the formula so effective?
What is it about that? I mean, I think that's what it is, right? I think it is that is what makes reality TV so effective, right? It's that it's entertaining as heck, right? Like, that brings me back, right? The fights, how everything is just amplified, and, you know, everything's bigger on reality TV. It's just like Texas, everything's bigger, right? So we have this, there's massive entertainment value there, right? Because everything is kind of zanier and more amplified, right? But at the same time, right, I think it resonates with so many people because it is kind of, it is fundamentally a very conservative genre, right? In the sense that the things that it's telling us about race, gender, class, even the way we think about marriage and childhood and fashion and money and sex, right? All of these things, in some ways, reality TV is so fundamentally conservative, as is the United States more generally, right? So I certainly think that this duality is one of the things that brings people to reality TV, right? You have this entertainment value, but at the same time, it's kind of reaffirming your ideas about the world.
Right. And you talk at various points about not just that duality, like functioning with the two traits in tandem with each other, but also ways that the tension is also really exciting to us as viewers. Like, examples that occur to me are, I forget the name of the character, but it's that fight that you reference on Love and Hip Hop, I think. And the fact that this is this like astronomically wealthy Black woman, but in the context of the show, the producers seem to deliberately bring out like a combative side in her, and they seem to be provoking her to get in fights with other characters. And, you know, that feeds into our long held stereotypes about Black people. But then at the same time, she's so wealthy. And there's this sort of, you know, we as viewers get to watch this and be electrified by the tension of it. Or, I mean, other forms of tension, like in the shows that are about, let's just, for lack of a better word, like lower income people entering their children in pageants, like, they're dressing these kids up to the nines and having them perform a sort of, I guess, stage respectability. You know, they're making stage stars out of their kids, but then we watch them backstage, and, you know, in the case of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, they're farting, they're talking frankly about their weight, they're doing all these things that we don't expect from Miss America types. And I'm wondering what you make of not just the duality, but the tension, and what that does for us as viewers.
Yeah, I think both of those are really interesting examples. I guess I'll just take the first example. You know, there's so many shows. It's very interesting to me that there's so many shows about ostensibly kind of moneyed or well-to-do Black women, like women who've kind of made it, right? But always on these shows, they're kind of presented as, not all of them all of the time, but many of them are kind of presented as quick to anger, as kind of buffoons in some ways, right? And it's very layered and intersectional, right? So you have the fact that, you know, even historically in this country, you know, for people of color to succeed and for women to succeed, right? A lot of people don't want that to happen. They don't want to see that happening because, again, that upsets kind of the apple cart of how our society is structured, right? So historically, when we have seen that happen, the cultural impulse has been to kind of smack that down, right? So to kind of limit the respectability there. And I think we can absolutely see that happening on these shows where it's like, well, yes, you're like a successful person of color, so we're going to present you in this way that is shown as kind of foolish and buffoonish to kind of smack you down and kind of put you in your place, for lack of a better word. And again, these types of kind of buffoonish stereotypes, again, have existed for hundreds of years, right? They were in minstrel shows. So this kind of idea of like a buffoonish kind of buffoonish Black person who had kind of made something of themselves, but, you know, didn't have the like proper mannerisms to go along with it. Now we can see how they've stayed in our culture and they've persisted and they're durable. And now they're being put on blast in these shows.
Yeah, I mean, all right, on that note, what do you think the role of smugness is in reality TV fandom? Because you talk a lot about how the fandom is interactive, not just on the level of, you know, we talk to each other about our favorite shows, we get on social media to have group conversations about our favorite shows, but it's also interactive in the sense that we're ostensibly watching real people living their real lives, and it's almost like a choose your own adventure. We can sit there and think to ourselves, that was stupid. I would never have handled that situation that way. And that's a big part of the pleasure of it. And I'm wondering what you think that says about, the role of smugness to us as viewers.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've thought about this before, but not in sort of context of smugness, but I think you're right that it is smugness, right? And it relates to this kind of the voyeurism reason that we're watching reality TV, right? There's so many reasons that we watch reality TV, and we watch different shows for different reasons. But one of the reasons we watch reality TV, right, is because it's a train wreck, right? And we watch and then we say, well, I'm not part of the train wreck, right? And it makes us feel better for not being part of that. Even if we're train wrecks ourselves, we're not part of that particular train wreck, right? So yeah, and absolutely. And that comes out in the fandom where it's like, well, I would never have chosen chicken as that protein for the barbecue challenge, right? Or, you know, we can talk about amongst ourselves. And I think that kind of reaffirms our sense that, thank goodness, like we're not in the train wreck, right? And that's, you know, and I think part of that is classed and raced and gendered as well. I have this vignette in the book that comes from this book by sociologist Jennifer Leno, where she talks about how sort of in the 1800s, people went to what's called slumming parties, where they
underlined that and wrote "ew" next to it.
Well, yeah, for those of you who haven't read the book, people, like basically wealthier people would come to like poorer neighborhoods in the cities in London and New York and watch a terrier kill a rat in a hole in the ground. And they were called slumming parties because they got sort of pleasure from going and kind of seeing how lower class people lived, right, in kind of a gross way, right? And I said, you know, we can kind of draw a straight line from the rat pits of yore to kind of the ratchet stereotypes of today, where you have people, especially people like middle class or higher people, right, looking at these images and that kind of reaffirming their smugness, their superiority, and their sense of self.
Yeah, you've got a really interesting section on like class mobility and the way it works and the way that we sort of see it play out on reality TV, where especially with the shows that are about rich people getting in catfights with each other, like first of all, a lot of them aren't rich. Like there are a handful of Real Housewives who truly do have money. And then there are a bunch who are just like kind of an accessible type of wealthy, but it doesn't matter. They're still presented as rich people, many of whom come from not wealthy backgrounds, who have retained some of those not wealthy characteristics, or characteristics that we think of as for poor, tacky people. Like they fight, they curse, the way they dress sometimes is like not the way we would choose to dress if we suddenly had millionaire money. And so we participate on that level just by scrutinizing the effects of the class mobility as those effects are presented to us. And I don't know, I just think it's really interesting the way that reality TV purports to show us class very clearly. It purports to tell us what these millionaires' lives are really like, but at the same time, it manages to elide so much of like what makes someone act like a millionaire, what we think of as rich person behavior versus tacky behavior. And I think that, how do I want to put this? I don't know, I just think that the way class mobility presents itself in reality TV is really interesting, and in the viewership, because as you say, while people from all income strata do watch and love reality TV, it's often not the same shows, which is interesting. And there's this arch appreciation in quote unquote rich people's love of reality TV that we don't really see with everybody else. It's like they have access to so many different types of culture that we just don't. And it's, you know, it's in the same sense that you talk about slumming parties. Like, rich people have the ability to dress down and go watch a terrier kill a rat. Poor people really don't have the option to dress up and go hang out at Buckingham Palace for a while. And I guess I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the way that not just class, but class mobility presents itself on reality TV.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts about that. Where to begin? Yeah. So in the book, I'm gonna throw out another sociologist here, but kind of talk about Bourdieu. I'm sorry. But this is sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, and if you haven't read his work, right, he talks about class, but how class is not just about how much money you have. So he has this word habitus, where he talks about, where it's basically used to describe like the things that come along with the social class into which you're born. So your tastes, what kind of music you like, what kind of food you like, right? Your orientation toward the world, how you're taught to kind of behave and move in the world. And he notices that that's very aligned with whatever class and the class status where you're born, right? Like what kind of music we like is very closely associated with the class status we were born into, right? So, you know, we're talking about, like, one of the reasons we watch reality TV, some people, right, is to kind of look down on groups, look down on certain groups, like the Honey Boo Boo family, like maybe middle class people looking down on working class people, which studies have actually shown that is one reason why people do tune into reality TV. But, you know, as Bourdieu shows us, we like to kind of deride and make fun of people without money, but we also like to kind of deride and make fun of rich people who don't know how to be rich, right? Like this stereotype has kind of been in entertainment for years, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? Beverly Hillbillies, right? All these examples of, okay, so there's this person with a lot of money, the habitus doesn't match, right? Like we expect certain behaviors, learned behaviors, tastes, ideologies from people who have this level of income. Wackiness ensues because those two things don't meet up, right? And reality TV about ostensibly rich people, and again, I agree with you, are they really rich? Within the fiction of the show, yes, the Real Housewives are rich, even if they're all filing for bankruptcy and their houses are like underwater, right? But they're rich. But yeah, right. So we're looking at people who, you know, are rich, but don't know how to be rich. And that's where the entertainment value comes from, right? But in seeing that sort of mismatch, right, that really highlights our expectations that we have for different social classes, right?
Right. Okay, you guys can start putting your questions in the chat. Please do not use the Q&A function. I do not know how to use it. But load up the chat with any don't use the non-existent Q&A function. I extra don't know how to use it. But load up the chat with some questions. I'm going to ask a few more myself. Here's one that your book definitely left me with. So of course, this is the sociological approach to reality TV. You talk at great length about the social values that reality TV has mined exhaustively, like conservatism, conformity, following the rules. Even if we are presented with people who don't do it, we're still supposed to take away the message that we should do it. What I'm curious about is whether you see the genre as exemplifying what I'd call moral values. Like, what do we see as the role of loyalty in reality TV? The role of being hardworking or being hospitable? Because I think we do see these things play out, but more in the background.
Oh, loyalty. Everyone wants me to write about loyalty.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
No, but I think there's a lot, right? There's a lot going on that involves loyalty in reality TV, right? So, you know, even the idea of being there for the right reasons, right? Like what are the right reasons, right? It's kind of fidelity for that, you know, if you don't know, like this is a phrase that's used often on The Bachelor, but on other shows as well, right? So sort of having loyalty to oftentimes these people that you've never really met before. Survivor, you know, it's all about loyalty, right? It's forming these alliances and you better not break them, right? Shows like Naked and Afraid. So I do think that they're kind of extolling that virtue of kind of fidelity and loyalty, right? In a show like The Kardashians, right? You could argue, right? Maybe you don't agree with their morals in some ways, right? But the one thing that has remained consistent across that show, and maybe it will be again when they come to Hulu, I don't know, but that's remained consistent is family, right? Religion scholar Catherine Lofton talks about this, about how the one kind of talisman that they hold onto is family, and that's been consistent, right? Loyalty to their family has been consistent across all the seasons, and that's arguably one of the reasons they've been so successful is because they have stuck together. For the most part, they've stuck together through all of this, right? So I do think there are certain values, but in addition to loyalty, right, I think in general, reality TV is showing us kind of what we consider to be kind of real and good and legitimate and right and normal and healthy, right? Like from everything from like what shape of what should a family look like? And if it doesn't look like that, like, is that normal and healthy? Or, you know, what pants to buy, right? If you want to buy this other pair, like that's not normal, right? So I think absolutely reality TV is constantly telling us, and in many ways reaffirming for us what we initially thought about, you know, what's kind of right and good.
Yeah, I mean, where this question comes from for me is when you talk briefly about how keeping it real has become such a cliche in the reality TV landscape. Like shows of all different kinds, contestants are expected to keep it real, whatever that means to them. And it's just so woven into the common rhetoric of reality TV, to the point that like it probably seemed weird as hell the first time it was ever said on a show, because like, what does that even mean from person to person? But at this point, it's the lingua franca. We all know what it means, and we all know how we feel about it when we either see it being done on a reality TV show or see it being violated. So I think that it's just interesting to me the way that the moral fiber of the reality TV like educational program seems to play out so much in the background, and yet has become so ingrained to us as viewers, not just of reality TV, but in all kinds of entertainment. I feel like those sorts of values have leached their way out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think authenticity for sure is like the moral lodestar of reality TV, right? Like, again, keeping it real, being authentic, you know, as I picked that apart in the book, because none of us are truly an authentic, natural self, right? We're always doing performances at all times, right? Maybe not the amped up performances that people in reality TV are doing, right? I've never like hit anyone with a Gucci bag, right? Like performing right now, right? So I think, yeah, if there are, it tells us a lot. I mean, like maybe I could write a whole book about reality TV and morality, right? Or maybe an article. But yeah, I think, you know, one of the kind of central moral tenets of reality TV is you gotta be authentic. You gotta keep it real.
Okay, and I have a question in the chat from Jessica. A question that came up when I was discussing tonight's talk with my aunt. Are competition shows like Great British Baking Show reality TV shows in your thinking? And also, what's your favorite reality TV show above all else?
Oh, thank you, Jessica, who is definitely like not my best friend, seeding questions in the chat. So my favorite reality show is RuPaul's Drag Race. Absolutely. I think there's some problematic aspects of the show, but I just, you know, as someone who studies gender, I just love what the show can teach us about the gendered performances that we're all doing all the time. And it's just a fabulous show. And the second part was sort of how to define the boundaries of reality TV, right? I was actually just talking about this earlier today, right? So the unsatisfying answer to that is, the sociology answer is, reality TV is a social construct, right? So the boundaries are hazy, right? I think we can sort of have a collective agreement that reality TV is TV that features non-actors, Although features people ostensibly being themselves, even if sometimes there's scripting and sometimes there's staging, and there also might be actors in like dramatic reenactments, but for the most part it's people being ostensibly being themselves, right? And its primary goal is to entertain, not educate or inform. And it gets hazy when you're looking at like HGTV shows, like Fixer Upper type shows, which you could argue are more about education, right? Like how to repair I don't watch those, but like how to repair a banister. I don't sconce, not sconces, I'm sure, right? Yeah, so I think probably every scholar who writes about this would draw the boundaries a little bit differently, but kind of generally speaking, I'm comfortable saying that they're shows featuring people being themselves, but they're not, it excludes like news shows, which are supposedly primarily intended to educate rather than entertain.
Yeah, and on a related note, Tristan in the chat says perhaps competition shows are an attempt at creating something more highbrow, since the values there are skill-based. Could there be a higher brow reality show, or is that an oxymoron? You do talk a little bit about like when they try and get educational in your book.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, there's definitely a hierarchy of acceptability when it comes to reality shows, right? So I think there's this Annette Hill, who wrote a book about reality TV. She surveyed students, and one said there's crap that I would watch and crap that I would never watch, right? It's all crap, right? Because it's reality TV, it's a guilty pleasure, right? But there's some that we kind of hold in higher esteem. And that tended to be, in these studies, shows that sort of people felt like they learned something from, right? So like the HGTV shows that like play innocuously in dental rooms across America, right? People don't necessarily have that same guilty pleasure feeling about tuning into those shows. You probably wouldn't see Snooki and JWoww, moms with attitude, in a dental waiting room. I would love that, but I don't think that's going to happen right anytime soon. So there's a certain acceptability to these shows that maybe have less conflict, are more, like you said, skill-based, right? And it's interesting because if you look at competition shows, my students always tell me that those are the shows that seem realist to them of all the reality TV shows, which is interesting because those are so structured, right? You're kind of put people like in real life, you're never going to have to do like a cheese doodle flambe or whatever they're doing, right? But then I kind of get it, right? Because within that structure, they kind of just let people like be themselves, right? And show off their technique and show off their skill. So I think, yeah, I do agree that so there's the skill that exists that makes it kind of put it toward the top of the hierarchy. And then there's also kind of the teaching aspect. If people feel like they're learning something from it, then whatever that thing is that they're learning, then that kind of pushes it up in the hierarchy.
Coming from Margot. Oh, Margot referenced my book. Thank you. Apropos of Rax's writing, Danielle, what is the best of tackiness in the realm of reality and why?
Oh my gosh.
That is so hard to answer.
I know, I might have to kick it back to you because you're the expert on tackiness.
I mean, my thesis about tackiness is that it's camp without the wink. Like it's something that would otherwise be campy, but you're too embarrassed about it to allow it to get to that point. So, I mean, for me, the eternal gold standard is Jersey Shore and its various spin-offs and Snooki and JWoww type behaviors. I will love that show forever, and that show showed me tacky like nothing before it had ever done.
Yeah. Would you argue though in kind of later seasons they were kind of winking? They were kind of in on the joke?
Yeah, by the time they went to Florence together, it was like, and you guys have sponsorships now and you have an image to maintain, and yeah, it's this image, but like once you start repeating your own catchphrase every episode, it's just like, this is too self-aware, I gotta move on.
Yeah, but the first season, yeah. The first season was rather organically tacky. I can get behind
that. From Fiona, can you tell us about who you dedicated the book to? Oh, that's a sweet
question. I dedicated the book to my daughter, Fiona.
Yeah. You tricked me into asking a Fiona question. That's cute. Okay, from Mike, depicting, comparing, and contrasting notions of class and human values like loyalty, didn't start with reality TV. Is reality TV different from scripted fiction? If so, how?
Yeah, well, so it's not scripted. Well, so sometimes it's scripted, so I'm not even going to say it's not scripted. I think yes. So certainly, well, tackiness, but even again, like racism, sexism, classism, these are all things that existed, that have existed, and still exist within scripted TV. Reality TV, I think, kind of uniquely kind of dials it up, right? The kind of stereotypes that you see and the kind of roles and norms that you see really are amplified in a way that you do not often see today on scripted TV. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's ostensibly people just being real people, right? That we can explain it in a way and be like, well, that's just, that's how people are, right? Because it hasn't been scripted that way. So it's not really racist. It's not really sexist. It's just, that's how the housewives are, right? They just like to drink a lot and hit each other with their bags, right? And that's not sexist at all. No one wrote that. So I think reality TV kind of gets away with being overly those things in ways that scripted TV, despite the fact that scripted TV is still those things in some ways, reality TV kind of uniquely gets away with kind of having these caricatures of what I would consider to be our society's ills.
Yeah. I mean, even like beyond just scripted and unscripted, I think with scripted TV, we all have a sort of sense of who is in the driver's seat, like the sorts of people who are writing TV shows. I mean, obviously that's not a monolith, but I think that, in our heads, we're like, oh, writer equals knows what they're doing. We watch something like Succession and we assume that all the cattiness and backbiting is going somewhere because we know what's going on in the driver's seat. The cattiness on reality TV, like even if it is scripted, even if it is managed by the production, we have a very different idea of who's in control there, I think. Okay. Tristan says there's undoubtedly a difference because there's more of a sense of improvisation, and even given prompting, there is a documentary slant. Yeah, I mean, arguably documentaries were the original reality TV shows. Like, even though somebody is again in the driver's seat, we do get to see real people saying real things and behaving in real ways.
Yeah, I know. And so one of the critiques of, reality TV, and even, I've seen now in some comment sections that I shouldn't be reading, but that have to do with my book, right? Just, everyone, you don't know that this isn't really real. This is all scripted. None of this is real, right? Like, well, okay, read the book because I address that, right? But, nothing that is shaped into a cultural product is 100% real, right? Like the news is curated. They decide what stories to tell. Those stories reflect our cultural values, right? And mores, right? So reality TV, of course, is not real. Documentaries, right? They pick a subject, right? Like you said, there's somebody in the driver's seat. They're telling a particular narrative about a particular thing, right? And especially the news, and I'm not even talking about like fake news, right? Just even like regular news that's putting out a story, right? There's going to be some kind of slant, or at least they're picking what they're going to say. They're picking what topic they're going to talk about. So yes, I agree that reality TV is not fully real, but nothing is. Like, nothing that we consume culturally is really real.
And then we have, this is an interesting viewpoint from Jess. I'm a reality TV producer and I do not understand this accusation. I assume the accusation that things are being scripted and managed. People lob it at us all the time. Yeah, I mean, okay, I would be curious about, as viewers, we do tend to assume that things are being managed. I mean, just people can't be shown doing exactly what they're doing 24 hours a day, and stuff gets picked and chosen. But I do think there's a real paranoia in the way that we look at that idea that things are being managed. And like, basically, why do we assume we're being lied to by reality TV in a way that we don't with scripted TV? Because yeah, as Jess says, y'all don't have the budgets to follow people around and wait for them to be exciting at you.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I do think there's that level of paranoia, even, in the fandom, going back to the fandom, right? People think that Andy Cohen has a lot more power than I think, having read Brian Moylan's book, than he actually does, right? Like, he made Ramona act that way, or he doesn't have his fingers in like the day-to-day of the Real Housewives, right? So I think, yeah, I think that people do tend to think that it's more kind of puppetry happening than there might actually be. But, there are, shows like The Hills have come out, and clearly, that show was to some extent scripted. Scenes were staged. The people on that show have said that, right? Even at the very end, like this classic reality TV moment where they pan away and it's a studio, right? Like they pan away and they're like, oh, fourth wall down. Yeah, this is a TV show, right? So yeah, I mean, I think reality TV show producer would know better than I would about the kind of production mechanisms behind it. But I think, of course, some of it is kind of, curated. And of course, there's some kind of, at least the casts are selected, certain personalities are selected, like they're given certain challenges to do in the competition shows. So yes, but I don't really, I agree that like I don't really understand the kind of full extent of paranoia that people have, and they're insistent that these shows are not real. And even if these shows weren't real at all, that doesn't mean they can't tell us something about our culture. I would have the same, if I found out that everything was scripted and staged on every reality show, I would have the same exact argument, which is they can absolutely teach us about ourselves as a kind of a broader culture.
All right, we've got Rakesh saying, one of the reasons I find it impossible to watch, for example, the Real Housewives, is I can't help but see a correlation between our last president and the social space that these people seem to inhabit. Can you speak to the sense that they are replicating an upper class that is fabricated, corrupt, spurious, etc.?
Oh, Rakesh, you should give the Housewives a chance. No, I understand that critique. I think for me, it's easier to kind of to savor the Housewives because I kind of know that they're not really the upper class, as we talked about, right? I think most people, someone was asking me earlier today, like a reporter was asking me earlier today about like who in the like actual upper class is on reality TV. And it's really hard to find like an actual elite who participates in reality, other than Donald Trump, who is an elite who participates in reality TV. It's kind of the performance of elite status. It's not actually kind of Trump. Well, it is Trump, but it's not kind of Trump's kind of cronies and contemporaries. So yeah, I think for me, I find it more palatable because I know that they're not kind of reproducing the same kind of issues and foibles that Trump has now really pushed into the mainstream. But I think that's a valid critique of reality TV kind of more generally, right? Well, reality TV kind of brought Trump to us. So take that as you will.
That's one point against.
I mean,
that's one significant point against.
Well, I said, like correlation's not causation. Like,
right, of course.
Would we have elected him if would we have elected him if, we had not seen him kind of wearing a suit in a position of power, like sitting behind a desk barking orders at people, if he hadn't been like kind of part of, and he already was part of the cultural zeitgeist, right? But like through this show, that really kind of catapulted him. So I don't know. I don't know if we would have elected him president if it hadn't been for The Apprentice. I think it certainly helped.
I mean, my sense is that even if he had run for president and won without something like The Apprentice, we would have had a very different Trump as president, because if anything, that show and its wild popularity kind of taught him how to play that character. I mean, before that time, you were not hearing about Trump in that same way. You were kind of hearing about his wheeling and dealing, or you were reading The Art of the Deal for some reason. It was a very different Trump that we were interacting with before that stage of his celebrity. But
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think, so I'm going to be honest here. I used to watch The Apprentice, and I actually stopped watching because I found that his decisions became kind of arbitrary and capricious in terms of who he was firing that week. And previously it seemed to kind of follow sort of a pattern, even if I didn't agree with it. I kind of understood where he was coming from, but it just kind of like, it kind of all blew up. And I was like, I like reality shows that kind of make sense to me. Yeah.
They got to play by their own rules. I think they tend to jump the shark when They play too fast and loose with their own internal logic. I'm on board for whatever crazy situation you're going to show me, but it has to follow the rules that you set for it.
Tyron, America's Next Top Model, also did that.
Oh my God. You could have a whole book about the craziness that was that show.
I mean, yeah, no, someone was telling me today, kind of looking back, like some of those episodes were really offensive.
There was like kind of a lot of blackface on that show.
More than once. They got critiqued for doing blackface and then they did it again. Like, what? Are you coming? Okay.
Yeah, kind of a lot. Okay, if audience members don't have any other questions, I just have one more that I'd love to close out on. In your book, you talk a bit about how one crucial aspect of reality TV celebrity is the shill, the sorts of products that the stars get paid to promote and the way they go about promoting them, that aspect of the business. And I'm wondering what you think that has to tell us about ourselves as sites of labor.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's also kind of another difference we were speaking to between reality TV and scripted TV. Not that scripted TV never tries to sell you anything, there's commercials, there's product placement, but sort of this kind of multi-platform approach of reality TV has kind of always been part of the genre. So, going back to even the first episodes of The Real World, right? You're watching the show, but they're also telling you what music you're listening to in the little caption, and you're trying to then buy the music that you're hearing on the show, right? Because MTV used to be all about music, right? And so now it's like, another Real Housewife doesn't come on unless they're going to try to sell you something, right? So it always really has been kind of this platform, not only for entertainment, but also for, okay, but now you can buy the book, you can buy the action figure, you can, follow on Twitter, they could be an influencer, right? SpawnCon. So this idea that sort of everything is kind of all about selling, right? And we see that, right, with the proliferation of MLMs, multi-level marketing, right, where it's like, oh, your friend from high school just wants to reconnect, and and they, it seems like they're just being friendly with you, but then they want to sell you leggings, right? So every kind of social relationship is about kind of spin, is about sponsorship and selling, which we kind of see more and more with these MLMs. So reality TV was kind of doing that, again, the canary in the coal mine for a really long time.
All right, well, yeah, that's all I had. Definitely buy this book. I got so much out of reading this book as a reality TV fan. McNally, do you want to play us off?
I can play you off. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Thank you for your questions. Buy the book. I've just dropped another link in the chat. It is on our website and it's in all our stores, so definitely check it out. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to end the meeting, and it always ends very abruptly and awkwardly, so I'm sorry about that. But thank you all for coming so much, and congratulations, Danielle, and thank you, Rax.
Congrats.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Rax.